You right? Am I all set to get going?
Gerida, this is Matt. I think you're muted. Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'm hearing from Ms. Reinheimer that we are live. Her mic is not working for some reason. So you can start whenever you're ready.
All right. All right. Well, I will call the virtual meeting of the Finance and Administrative Committee to order. With that, I will move for approval of the minutes from 10/19/21 and 12/13/21.
So moved.
Seeing no opposition to that, we will move on to number 3. Well, actually, I see that we moved the reval up here, so to item B. Is that right, Mr. Hart? I thought that we saw that down further in the agenda, but
Matt Hart, Town Manager. That is accurate, Mr. Chairman. We moved it up in the agenda, seeing as this was the primary business item for tonight. We wanted to have a chance to provide the council with a pretty comprehensive update as to where we stand with the recent revaluation project.
all right. Well, I will let you lead the way.
All right, thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Good to see you all online. Hopefully you all have had a good and healthy holiday, all things considered. No, it's certainly a challenging time. So joining me here this evening is Mr. Dakers, our Director of Assessment, our Town Assessor. Mr. Dakers is going to take the lead on the presentation. Council members should have access to a PowerPoint in City View, and we will make sure to make that available to the public as well. Revaluation, as all the council members know, it's something we need to do every 5 years. Every 5 years, it's required by state statute. Our last revaluation was completed effective for October.
Mr. Hart, can you just pause for a second? I just want to make sure everyone has access to the PowerPoint. Is everyone okay? Okay, sorry, go ahead. Just want to make sure.
Oh, sure. So our most recent revaluation was completed effective October 1st of 2016. And we are approaching the end of the project for the most recent revaluation, and the effective date will be October 1st of 2021. And that updated grand list will form the basis of taxation for next fiscal year. So with that as a quick overview, through you, Mr. Chairman, I'll now turn the meeting over to Mr. Dakers.
Mr. Dakers.
Good evening, everyone. I have with me this evening also Patrick Sullivan.
Mr. Dakers, we have, if I may, we have a little bit of echo.
You getting an echo?
Yeah, I think so. We have.
Hi, Joe. Can you hear me? Is my mic working now?
Yes, your mic is working.
So, Joe, you need to mute your desktop computer. If you mute your desktop computer, we're not going to hear the echo.
Okay, it's muted now. All right, thank you very much. I have with me this evening also Patrick Sullivan. Patrick is here in the background. As a courtesy, we're keeping our distance, but I may have him participate in the presentation at some point. With each revaluation that we have, they all have their own different characteristic. I've been here since 2003, and I worked on the 2006 revaluation, the 2011 revaluation, and 16, and now the 2021. And each one of them had their own characteristic. 2006, as many of you may recall who were here, we saw values skyrocket by as much as 76% townwide. And in spite of all of the energy that this revaluation has, we don't have that same earmark as we did in 2016. We have a total now of 22,474 parcels of real estate in town. That is separated by about 21,200 residential parcels, and then another 800 and something commercial parcels that we have in town. We employed 3 revaluation consultants to assist us with this revaluation: Vision Government Solutions, Municipal Valuation Services, and Advisora. I apologize, your copy of the PowerPoint does not show Advisora. We use them for our estate properties in town, properties that are 10,000 square foot or larger. The data collection phase was completed in September of 2021, and that essentially started in April of 2020 when we sent out our data mailers. After receipt of those data mailers, I think we had about a 65% response townwide. We did some quality control on those and identified those that required a follow-up inspection based upon owners' data changes. All of that was completed effectively as of September 1st. Our notices went out on the 18th of November of last year, and our conferences started immediately after, around the 22nd of November. The conferences ran from November the 22nd through December 30th of 2021. And those ran from 7:30 in the morning to 7:30 in the evening, Monday through Thursday, and on Saturdays from 9 to 12. We did not have appointments on Fridays. That day was set aside to do inspections on properties based upon information that was generated from the conferences. By the way, the inspections that did occur were not done, interior inspections weren't physical. These were virtual inspections that were done by assessment staff. Chart number 3 shows that residential property values increased by 13.9% townwide, or about $832 million. Subcategories of the residential property included condos and multifamilies. Condominium values were up about 2.5%, or $12.3 million. Multifamilies were up about 15.5%, or $16.8 million. In West Hartford, we have about 5 basic neighborhoods in town. That's chart number 4. The 10,000s, the 30,000s, the 40,000s, the 50,000s, and the 70,000s. Within each one of these neighborhood designations, there are a number of sub-neighborhoods. And the purpose of the sub-neighborhoods is to better identify the homogeneous quality of properties in each of these subdivisions. And actually, most of these neighborhoods came out of subdivisions way back from the 50s. But we have modified them over the last 10 years because of new subdivisions in town. I'll start with neighborhood 10,000. You can see that at the bottom. That is a neighborhood that experienced the largest increase townwide, just shy of 25%. That is primarily the Elmwood section of town, with a lot of entry-level housing. And of course, low interest rates, first-time home buyers have really spurred interest in that neighborhood. And the sale prices skyrocketed. A lot of home buyers were cash buyers, believe it or not. And as you know, with the pandemic, there was a lot of competitive bidding on these properties. The neighborhood 30,000 saw about a 15% increase on average. And you can see from the narrative at the bottom of the page of the area of town that covered. I'm going to swing all the way to the top, which is another outlier neighborhood, which is the 70,000s. And that is predominantly all of the west of Mountain Road properties. As you can see, they barely hit 10% on increase. These are a lot of our larger properties, and the type of energy that you were seeing on some of these entry-level or mid-range properties in town, in the neighborhood 30,000 or 40,000, we just didn't have that in the 70,000s. I was actually surprised with some of the sale prices that we did see in that area. Now, I'm running through this, but I will love to entertain any questions that you might have on any of the data that I'm pointing out to you. Chart number 5, our single-family home prices increased by almost 13% in 2021 at $361,000. That ran from January through October. We don't have the November or December data at this point in time, but I suspect that it's going to be slightly higher than that number that we have here in front of us. And you can see how the values have been changing over a period of time. Things were pretty much flat for 2018 and 2019. In 2020, we start to see some increase in value. And then, of course, in 2021, the values just took off. Condominium values are sluggish, and they have been for quite some time. The numbers at the bottom of the chart kind of evidence that activity. The condos present their own particular challenge. They're different than the single-family homes. You know, it's very difficult to see what's going on sometimes inside of those properties. And a lot of times you don't become privy to them until one of the properties sells. We see the information on MLS, and we find out that that property has experienced some substantial renovations, whether it be in kitchens and bathrooms, and that shows up in their sale price. So we have to be very careful about kind of like extrapolating that information and plastering or painting the other units in that building with that same information. Oftentimes, a lot of these units haven't had any renovations at all. Chart number 6, again, just regurgitate some information I gave you already. There are approximately 800 commercial properties in town. Commercial values in aggregate jumped 7%. Some of the subcategories of commercial property are industrial, apartments, and retail and mixed use. Industrials are doing very well in West Hartford. They're up 20%. We have a lot of single tenant user stuff along Talcott, Grassmere Avenue and those areas. Not a lot of the growth is coming from places like you may anticipate, like Colts Firearms or what's the place on Warrington Avenue?
Charter Oak.
Yeah, Charter Oak. So most of this stuff is coming from some of our smaller single tenant user stuff. And because we don't have a lot of that in town, and a lot of our landscapers or some of our small contractors, they're looking for space, and they're willing to pay for it. Retail is up 3.75%. There's a rumor that retail has been dead for the last 5 years from a lot of the commercial conferences that I have attended. But our numbers are showing quite different when we look at all of their income and their expense data. Their income is up. Not everybody is doing well. West Farms is holding their own. Corbin's Corner is holding their own. The Sheritage at 1445 New Britain Avenue, it's holding its own. Although it's having some problems with that second floor space, they have about 41,000 square feet up there that they cannot rent. Quite frankly, they had some co-user office space that they were marketing it for, in that industry right now with COVID seems to be having some real challenges because everyone is looking for larger spaces to segregate employees, if you will. And so that model right now is going to have to go through some revising. And not many people are looking for a second floor retail space. The other chart on page 8 is showing you the composite representation of each category to the total in West Hartford. For example, commercial has 73% of the total commercial base in town, and that largely encompasses all retail, office, and mixed-use space. Now that's a large piece of the pie for our commercial real estate in town. Industrial, 8%. Utility property, Connecticut Light and Power, Eversource, just 1%. And apartments, 18%. Slide number 9 is another, not the best tale right now that I can tell you about, but Blueback Square, as you can see, they're down 48%. Blueback Square sold for, I think, approximately $44 million last year at some point. And with all of our analysis, we had an MAI who worked with us on this thing. And a lot of what we're looking at when we walk down the streets, there's a facade. They're doing all kinds of deals to keep windows from going dark. And a lot of this is really the office space, to be perfectly honest with you. Offices have got hit very bad townwide and in all of our office centers. But the biggest thing that we had to contend with this is the sales price. It was an arm's length transaction, and we could not dodge that. We worked with the financial data that we did have in terms of the income and the expenses, and you can see we came up with a fair market value of $53.3 million. We have not heard back from them yet. We have reached out to them prior to finalizing our value, and their attorney got back to us and asked us not to reach out to the owner and that he would take a look at the data and get back to us at a later date. So we do the same thing with a lot of the larger commercial property owners. We've been doing that with West Farms Mall for years, and it's worked out very well for us. We've been able to avoid tax appeals on that stuff. West Farms Mall, as you know, sold. Taubman sold, I think, about 80% of their interest in that property, and now Simons is the main property owner there. We're trying to establish a new rapport with the new owners and their national tax representative. I've had a number of conversations with him. He's asked us for some data. I've given him what I could give to him. The income and expense information, we don't just let that go freely because it's confidential information and it's not available under FOI information. So we're working through that with him. He actually has an appointment. I'll segue to this right now. Our conferences are done for the residential properties, but we do have one more date, January 7th, for the balance of the commercial properties. The commercial property owners, they take a little bit longer than the residential guys because they want to analyze the data, and then they didn't start scheduling their appointments until late in December. So we've carved out another date for them, and that's January 7th. There are 14 property owners involved. If I were to list them, you know a lot of them already. But between the 14 owners, there's about 25 parcels of real estate that we have to discuss before we can close the door on all of the conferences. Overall, the commercials haven't done bad except for this outlier with Blueback Square. Corbin's Corner is holding its own. I Was surprised that I didn't see a bigger dip in West and Filene's, to be honest with you. 2325 Albany Avenue is holding its own. 316 North Main Street across the street is holding its own, as well as 333 North Main Street. In all of these instances, commercial real estate, there are three ingredients to commercial real estate. It's the income that they generate, their expenses, their vacancies, and quite frankly, one of the primary ones is the capitalization rate that we use on these properties. So the data that you're looking at here came from their income and expense reports, not something that we had to make up. It's their data. I'll go to slide number 10. This is, to put it mildly, this is ugly. This is our skilled nursing facilities, assisted living facilities, and continuing care retirement communities. We call them CCRCs. Across the board, this industry is on life support. And largely, they've already had issues, particularly the skilled nursing facilities with the reimbursements from Medicare. But with the pandemic, a lot of people are making some different kinds of decisions. They all have high vacancies now. Their income are down. A lot of customers, if you will, or patrons are opting for in-home services. You're starting to see a lot of that where people, if they can afford to stay home and have someone provide those services at home, they're doing that. These numbers are reflective of that. It's just, and I almost had a heart attack when I saw Macaulay. Macaulay is down 40%, to be honest with you. And we have a tax appeal on Macaulay, but I can talk about that at another time. So that's not good. That has taken a lot of the air out of the sail for commercial real estate. I'd like to stop here at this point before I go into the other part of the presentation and ask if there are any questions at this point.
Mr. Dakers, one, thank you for this report. I know that this is a year-end's work, and we appreciate all that goes into this. So I just want to say thank you on behalf of the council for everything that went into this. I know this is not an easy task every year, and we ask you every year to keep doing it. So we appreciate the work that goes into this, and I know that you get a lot of back and forth on this. So I have a few quick questions. One, they may be very open-ended, but based on the numbers that we're seeing from Blueback, one, why do you think that Blueback's numbers have dropped so significantly? And two, why do you think that the assisted living numbers have dropped so significantly?
Well, the Blueback Square, there was a transaction last year. They changed hands. It was $44 million, and you know, right off the bat, we thought there was something wrong with that number. You know, here's a development that in the early stages we had about $125 million on it in fair market value back in '07. And now we're looking at a sale price at $44 million. And so, you know, you have to start peeling the onion back and to find out what is going on with that transaction. We had an MAI involved in the process to peel back the onions. And the bottom line is Blueback Square's numbers are falling apart. The office space, vacancies, offices around town are having a hard time renting space. In some cases, vacancies have been on the market for as much as 18 months. And, you know, folks are working from home remotely, and that's putting some downward pressures on these office towers. They don't have the income, and the expenses are still there. So that's a problem. The other issue with Blueback Square is the retail. You know, we lost REI over a year ago. REI relocated to the Corbin's Corner. And our REI is an anchor tenant. And when you have an anchor tenant like REI that moves off, a lot of these anchor tenants have what they call these co-location agreements. And, you move in there because you want to participate in whatever traffic that they generate. But when you start losing your anchor tenant, then the, pardon?
Inline.
Yeah, the inline stores suffer as a result of that because of the lost traffic. So, and of course, I think the principal thing here is the sale price. We could not, we looked at these numbers, we looked at the capitalization rate that we were looking at it, and at the end of the day, the income is not there and the expenses on the offices are just so high. They're doing a lot of haircutting behind the scenes with the retail to keep these folks afloat, with the exception of the Cheesecake Factory. Cheesecake Factory has a formula that's very successful, but some of the other the eateries that we've seen there, they're short-lived. They don't last long, and I'm sure that the pandemic didn't help in this case as well. As far as the skilled nursing facilities, these CCRCs, it's driven by the pandemic. For those who rely at a higher census of tenants that were on Medicare or Medicaid, that was a problem because of the reimbursement levels from the state of Connecticut. And then the pandemic came in. I personally and Pat were at St. Mary's March 10th of 2020, and the order came down from the governor that everybody who, we had to vacate the premises. And around the same time, we were having an emergency meeting here. But their occupancy levels are lower now. We were looking at occupancy levels somewhere in the area in the high 90s, and now they're in the area of between 75 and 80. That's a real problem. And that is reflected in the calculations when we do an income approach to value that property. That's the primary reason. And I might add that, these properties now are viewed as a risk, as a higher risk. So before when you were looking at maybe a typical capitalization rate on some of these things between 11 and 12%, now you may be looking at 13 to 15%. So the higher that rate goes up, the lower that value goes. That's how the formula works. So if you have a low rate, your incomes are the same, the value goes up. If you have a higher cap rate and the incomes are the same, the values go down.
Well, thank you for those answers. Looking at members of the committee, anyone have any questions from the takers? Going once. We will move on to the motor vehicle portion of the presentation.
Well, you guys are letting me off easy. I had hoped for a little bit more, but thank you. So we have finished the supplemental motor vehicle list. Those bills went out in December, and that list is up 32%, or about $19 million. Our vehicle count is up 32% as well. And the vehicle count, quite frankly, is up because the motor vehicle department was closed down last year. And so cars didn't get registered, and we didn't get those cars on the list, and now they're showing up on our list, which accounts for the spike in the supplemental tax list. When we move over to the regular motor vehicle list, based upon the numbers that we're looking at now, mind you, we get a listing from the Department of Motor Vehicles in December. They run these vehicles through their computer system based on the VIN numbers utilizing the NADA pricing guide, and they generate values for these cars. We have approximately 44,000 vehicles in West Hartford now. Of those 44,000, 6,000 came through unpriced. So my staff has to manually price those using the NADA pricing guide. But the interesting thing to note is that vehicles that were on the 2020 grand list Those same vehicles are on the 2011 grand list. Those vehicles are up 12% in price. And that's largely due to what's going on in the car market right now. And there are a whole lot of different things happening with the chips for new cars, the smaller inventories of used cars, and a lot of demand for those cars have pushed the prices up substantially. So we're going to probably have some real challenges in July in this office when the tax bills are mailed as a result of that, because people are accustomed to seeing their values go down about 5-8% a year, not to increase by 12%, in spite of the facts. It just doesn't sit well with a lot of people. Lastly, business personal property, and this is a highlight for us. Our business personal property list is up 11%. Now, generally, all we deal with is, capital equipment purchases that they have, and that generally gets us in the area of maybe 2 to maybe 3% if we're lucky as an increase in the grand list after annual depreciation. But this year, we're looking at an 11% increase, which is about $20 million, which is a big deal for us on personal property. But I must say with some pride that we discovered an underground worm coming into West Hartford from Hartford. It's the MDC project that they were digging underground. And for October 1st of 2021, we discovered that it's on our side of the fence. And so we're picking that up. That by itself is about $25 million. So I think overall, right now we're looking at the grand list. We're forecasting an increase of about 11%, which is somewhere, and I'm just talking about the real property now, and I'm not talking about the motor vehicles and personal property. That's about $600 million of an increase for the real property segment of the grand list. And that is the extent of information that I can share with you tonight. And again, I would be delighted to answer any questions that you may have.
Well, thank you for that, Mr. Dickers. One question on that. Do you think that any of the proactive steps that the town has made in regards to some of the, I think it was the cottage laws that we had, has helped in regards to the new businesses? Have you seen that at all from your end?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. I didn't hear that.
I believe 2 years ago we patched or we adopted some resolutions in regards to cottage laws, allowing for people to bake in their own house, or some other flexibilities that we provided for other home-owned businesses. If that's been helpful in the businesses coming online.
We have not seen a spike in that category. We do have classifications for all of the businesses in towns, and we would consider that to be a home-based business. And I haven't seen a spike in that category. Most of the spike we're getting, quite frankly, is from furniture, fixtures, and equipment, computer equipment, and in this case here, with this last issue I just referenced, it would be machinery. But that would be a nominal category for us.
Well, thank you for that. It's nice to be the town making some money off of the MDC as opposed to the other way around. But is there any questions from members of the council? Mr. Davidoff?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Mr. Dakers. Joe, thank you for your excellent report this evening and the detail analysis of the different sectors that make up the grand list. Just want to get your perspective from a historical view. This isn't obviously your first rodeo doing revaluations, and obviously the 2006 one was an outlier in revaluation business. But without taking that one in particular and looking at the other 2 or 3 that you've been involved in, how would you say that this one compares to those?
This one is very robust compared to the 2011. I think the 2011 revaluation, if my memory serves me, it was an anemic increase of somewhere in the area of about 1.4%, if my memory serves me. And in 2016, I think it was 4%. I think it was 4%, and I would have to just confirm that from my files here. But those numbers stand out to me. We're looking at now, just talking about real property, 11%, and that's significant. Now, again, the average values in town went up only 13.9%.
Mr. Dale, feel free to carry on.
So through you, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Akers. So we hear a lot discussion around the council table. We say people and businesses want to locate in West Hartford. We're the gem of the region. It's the place that people would want to be. Would you say that the data that was collected from this reevaluation would support that suggestion?
I think that's very much so still holds true. I think one of our challenges that we kind of limited with space. For example, at one point in time before this pandemic hit us, our floor plates in our office buildings were too small for a lot of businesses that wanted to relocate here. So that was a disadvantage for us. The retail still is a desirable place to be, but just because of the socioeconomic demographics here that you deal with. So retailers want to be in that type of location. But again, one of the impediments to that right now is what we see going on with this national pandemic in the marketplace. Albeit there are a lot of people who are still, a lot of enterprises who are still faring well. We just saw recently with the national reports how much revenue was spent this Christmas, and it eclipsed what they spent last year. And I don't see West Hartford in a negative position in terms of that, although we do have some anecdotal examples that we can point to where some businesses are running into some challenges.
Thank you very much. Nothing further.
Thank you, Mr. Davidoff. Anything further? Mr. Winograd.
Thank you very much. Just a quick question. You mentioned we do have some appeals. When will we have sort of the final numbers? After obviously they can go to court, but in terms of for budget deliberations, when do you expect to be having a pretty much bottom line data for the entire town?
All right. Thank you for that question. After the final hearings on January 7th, we'll start to finalize our numbers, and we will have a report on those numbers, I hope before January 31st, which is the deadline date for the grand list. I like to give myself at least a week out so that we can edit and proof some of the numbers. So I'm hoping by the last week of this month that we will have final numbers across the board.
Thank you, that's it.
But if I may, just one other observation. Then we send out the assessment notices. And of course, property owners have the option to go before the Board of Assessment Appeals, should they desire. And once that process is complete, then we have final numbers that are the basis for the calculations with the mill rate and other activity.
Great. Thank you for that. Anyone else? Oh, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm juggling between my, because there's a little ambient noise. Joe, I also wanted to weigh in and say thank you very much. I know this is a heavy task in a year when things are cranking along, and surely in a pandemic year, even more so, even more challenging. I just wanted to know if you had an idea of other communities around us that are doing revals and what those numbers are looking like yet. It might be premature for that, but I'm just wondering if you have any data.
Well, Your Honor, I think it is a little premature. In fact, I was chatting with Meriden the other day, and I was talking to them about our revaluation, and they're not even they haven't even got to the point that we have. They haven't even sent out notices. In fact, I think they're going to be asking for an extension on the revaluation. And I told them, well, we don't do extensions on West Hartford. We try to finish on time. There are a number of other communities, as you are aware, that are doing revaluations, but I don't have any data on them at this time. But I'll be more than happy to provide that at a later date.
Sure, and one of the things that I know that CCM was looking at was extending revaluation because of some of the challenges that communities have faced, and in addition, also phasing in. It seems as though, and I was a little concerned prior to receiving these numbers, that there might be a skew in residential increases and not consistent in the commercial space, and that's it seems across the board fairly, you know, we obviously have Blueback that seems like a bit of an outlier, and maybe it's a transition of uses over time that will happen, and I think it was a unique situation, but also the nursing home and that dynamic, it is. I remember you warning us a couple years ago when we had some appeals on that, and saying this is the way it will go, you know, but that was prior to a pandemic and a high risk for elderly people in congregate settings. So anyway, obviously for us, that won't seem to be you know, an option, but I think it's an important option and something that some communities will need. But overall, this is a really good story for West Hartford, and I'm really thrilled with these numbers. And again, thank you for your hard work.
Well, Your Honor, in the interest of transparency, the shift that you intimated is going to be a very modest one to the residential side. So the residential, you know, when you talk about shifts, there is going to be a shift. What was that number for residential, the shift?
Very modest. 13% is the residential increase, and
yeah,
commercials are up over 7%.
So we're looking at a probably somewhere in the area of about a 4 to 5% shift from the commercials to the residentials. Nothing even close to what we saw in 2006. Just nothing like that whatsoever. That was an anomaly, and you know, we had a lot of properties that went down in value, to be perfectly honest with you. Some of our larger homes in town, you know, I saw some sale prices that occurred after the revaluation, and I was like, you know, and we dealt with this thing. We must have gone through, I don't know, 200 or 300 iterations in our models to try to emulate what was going on in the marketplace. But this pandemic was just doing some really unreasonable things out there, and people, you know, if they saw a piece of property and they had the resources to buy that property, and many of them were cash transactions. There was no financing about. They bought the property. And when you have arm's length transactions like these between willing buyers and willing sellers, that's what sets the market price.
Just one more thing, Mr. Chair. I just want to know, so neighborhood-wise, we get a sort of a heat map of properties that, you know, areas that rose over kind of over that mid rate and under, so we can understand the dynamic to certain properties. Again, nothing we can do about it, but understanding it, I think, is going to be important on messaging and communicating.
Your Honor, I have the map on order. This is kind of unique for me this time. Usually we're sitting in a room and I have this gigantic poster on the wall so that everybody could see what the impact of the revaluation in West Hartford was. So I do have one of those on order from our GIS provider, and hopefully at some time in the future I'll be able to share that with you.
I'll second.
Anyone else? All right. With that, I will move on to item number 3 of communications, which we do not have any. Then to number 4, staff reports. Mr. Hart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So for tonight, we will have staff reports from Financial Services, Mr. Privatera. Our town clerk is not with us here this evening, but she has a brief report attached. I would ask you to just take a look at that. If you have any questions, please shoot her an email. We've got Mr. Moran here who can provide a report from Information Technology, Mr. Ledworth for Human Resources, and then I will wrap up this section of the agenda. And then our final item tonight after staff reports will be an executive session.
Yeah, I will ask that outside of Mr. Privatera, unless there are folks that have questions on the other reports, because not everyone is here. We have questions from members of the committee outside of the financial services update. Just ask me on the report, but other than that, I don't think the other staff needs to go into a full report outside of Mr. Privatera. That works for you, Mr. Hart.
It does, Mr. Chair. Matt Hart, Town Manager. I think Mr. Privatera, though, in particular, would probably want to touch on a few key items, not his entire report.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you. Mr. Privatera, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Pete Privatera, Finance Director. Our latest projection, which you have a copy of, shows that we have a positive variance of 189,000, roughly 189.5. One of the significant changes that we made, as Mr. Dakers mentioned, the supplemental motor vehicle list really took a big jump here. I'm making a conservative estimate on the increase of about $300,000. Again, I'm being conservative here because I just want to make sure that when the collections come in, we're still collecting at the same rate that we normally do, because some of these values are really high. Overall, we're doing well on taxes. We're on track to collect at the same rate we did in the prior year. We did receive some FEMA reimbursement money that came in. Our building permits and conveyance taxes are doing very well, up about 416,000 over budget. I mean, the only area that's really stagnant is investment income, because again, there's really no place to invest your money without taking any risk that will give you any decent return. On the expenditure side, the two largest changes, we have fire, which is up roughly 1.2 million. However, that's a conservative estimate given the fact that they had just hired 10 additional firefighter paramedics. My understanding is they're all out of the academy. They're out doing their precepting. So my expectation is the next time I report, that number should start to come down. The only reason I'm not bringing it down now is because I just wanted to make sure that all the recruits that went into the academy actually finished and graduated the academy, and I'm told that that was the case. And there are a number of retirements that are hitting right now. Same with police. Police is up a little over $500,000. We have to date roughly $456,000 in retirement payouts. 14 employees, 6 of which are police and 4 are fire. And I'm expecting that number to stabilize now, because most folks, when they do put in their papers to retire, they do it around this time of the year. One area that we're keeping a very close eye on is leisure and services, the relocation expenses related to the 3 buildings that were flooded. We've expended, we're up around $285,000. There are still 8 families that have to be relocated. I know Leisure and Social Services is working on it, but I do have a little concern about that expense, because it continues to rise. And I've talked to the tax collector, and I've talked to Deputy Corporation Counsel Verano about what action can we take if there's no resolution to that in the near future. We've had some savings in non-public school transportation, because of less buses, and the board is projecting a slight surplus as well. So overall, I think we're in a good place. I think the numbers will get better as we move through the year. The weather has been great with respect to the storm account, and let's hope it continues. I'm sorry for the people who like to ski, but this is great news for me. Otherwise, I think we're doing okay. We're going to continue to manage the budget closely. The only other item I want to inform council on is that we are going to have a bond sale, roughly $15 million of general obligation bonds. The sale is going to take place in early February. Again, the timing on this is very good, because the Fed's made an announcement that they're going to start to raise interest rates. We're going to come in under that, so we should get a very, very good rate on our bonds when we sell them. I think the first week of February. Other than that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
I just have one question, Mr. Privateer, on the displaced families. It seems what you raised concern. What are steps that the town is taking internally?
Well, I asked Director Rubino Turco to update me on the status of how many families were still outstanding. I know that they were close to placing 5. I think there are 3 more that they're still working on. My only concern is that we are legally mandated to pay for this, when we first started talking about this not too long ago, it seemed we're talking 100 to 125,000. Now it's up to 275,000. So we are obligated to provide this, but I'm hoping that we can see some resolution to this soon. I don't know if Town Manager Hart wants to comment on that as well.
Go ahead, Matt.
Thank you, Matt Hart, Town Manager. The council may recall this is a set of apartment buildings on the West Hartford line that were badly damaged in one of the extreme storms we had this past summer. I think it was Storm Fred. I'm relatively certain. Anyhow, we've been working with the landlord to find more permanent accommodations for the tenants. This is something, though, that we may need to discuss with the council in executive session at an upcoming meeting.
All right. Understood.
Yep. Excuse me, just along those lines, and I forgive me, I don't know much about real estate law or whatnot, but I thought that if something like that happened, that renters insurance or something else would cover that, or landlords insurance. I'm not sure why the town is stepping in. Could you explain that? Thank you.
And Matt Hart, Town Manager, just to speak to it very generally, the town is subject to what's called the Uniform Relocation Act. And if residential tenants are displaced because of a code enforcement action we've taken, for example, if we have deemed a building to be unsafe, we have certain liabilities or certain responsibilities under that law to provide temporary accommodations to those tenants. Now, at the end of the day, we can lien a property, and that is typically what will occur. But you know, the numbers we're talking about here, it's been a long time since West Hartford has dealt with a case of this magnitude. So, you know, we are working to get it resolved, and that's going to involve finding more permanent residences for the handful of displaced tenants we have remaining.
Councilor Fay, does that answer your question? Thank you, Mr. Hart. We will look forward to hearing more about that at a later point. If there is more, if there's good news, I guess we'll see. In regards to the other reports, Mr. Hart, did Jared want to present, or are we good with, unless councilors have questions about it?
Mr. Moore and Jared, any quick items you wanted to touch on? And then Mr. Ledwith, I think you just have an oral report only.
I'm good, but here for any questions.
Thank you. And I saw that reading through the report, glad that you made great use of the CCM conference.
Yeah, that was good.
Good to see. Mr. Davidoff, you have a question?
No, I have a comment. Thank you for your hard work in securing, I think it was like over $1 million in full reimbursement for some equipment. That is quite an achievement, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Ledwith?
Good evening, everyone. Rick Ledwith, Executive Director of Human Resources. No formal report for the committee this evening. Just wanted to provide a quick update on our equity and diversity training that's been ongoing, as everyone's aware, for the last year. We have finalized all of our initial training with all of our non-public safety staff. We concluded that last month in December. And at this point, we are working with both the fire chief and the police chief to begin the initial training for our public safety staff, which is a little bit more difficult, obviously, with their 24/7, 24-hour, 7-day-a-week shifts that they work. So working closely with the chiefs in order to accommodate those schedules and get that training done, you know, during this first quarter of 2022. We're also, as you know, recruiting for our equity officer, and we'll be finishing up that recruitment process over the next couple of weeks, and we'll report back to the committee on that outcome shortly. Be happy to answer any questions that the committee had.
Glad to hear that we are making progress on that. I know that's been in the process for a little bit now, so glad to hear we're moving.
Sure have, yeah.
Mr. Manager, do you want to expand on anything?
I just have one item, Matt Hart, Town Manager. I wanted to talk briefly about American Rescue Plan funding. Council members will recall we spent a lot of time talking about that, our plans, our proposals, especially towards the end of the last council term. The town council did recently appropriate at our recommendation $6.3 million. And you may recall we had a proposal in front of you that totaled roughly $14.6 million in terms of rescue plan funded projects and initiatives. That leaves a balance of 8.3 from that 14.6. And for your next meeting, we would like to discuss about the projects and initiatives that are remaining on our list. And Mr. Chairman, I'll be reaching out to you and the mayor with some thoughts that I have for discussion and presentation to the committee next time around.
All right. Well, thank you for that. If not, we will move to item 6. Mr. Hart gave us some future agenda items there. With that, that objection, I'm going to move that we enter into executive session pursuant to section 1-206B of the general statutes to discuss pending litigations, namely 1050 Farmington Avenue LLC of West Hartford, a tax appeal case regarding 1050 Farmington Avenue and 3 Grenard Road, 4 Arlington Road. Seeing and hearing no objection, we will enter executive session. I will invite the town manager, the tax assessor, and the deputy corporate counsel to join us. Those that are not members of the committee, we will move into the executive session and then come back in.
Good night.
Is there a new number, Liam?
Yes, you're right. I should have provided it to you, but if not, Mr. Hart, can you text that to Ms. Fay?
Yes, I'll be happy to. Ms. Reinheimer did just send it out, Counselor
Okay.
Fenny, and
Okay.
as the deputy mayor said, after the executive session, we're going to have to come back into this meeting so you
Right.
can take a vote.
Okay. All right, great. I don't need you to text that. You just said that. I just didn't see it come through. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
And those
Thanks a
that are not members of the committee, you don't need to worry about coming back in for that. Only members of the committee can vote on it. So thank you all, and members of the committee, I'll see you in a minute.
Pat, I think I'm in the meeting. It's Gina. Yep.
Gina, I'm in. Gina,
Yes.
I'm in. I don't know. I see these names, but I didn't know if anybody else was in the meeting.
So Joe, I'm here on video. I see you're in the conference, but no video, and I see one other number here.
Well, that number is mine. Just bear with me a second. That's my number.
So are we the
because
only ones? Matt, can you hear us?
we emphasize getting the right sign on, and maybe somebody else didn't get it. There's Dorita.
Oh. Hi, Gina and Joe. You're not in executive session. This is the regular finance and administration. Please exit and rejoin the other meeting.
Well, hold on a minute before you dart off, because I'm looking at the same number on both of the emails you gave me.
Okay, I can forward the information to you again, Joe.
Yeah, you gave me a duplicate. Yep.
Okay, this is a hot mic. No, okay, bye.
All right. I can't hear her.
Hi, this is the live finance and administration committee. This is not the executive session. This is a live mic. If you need to get into executive session, please click on the other link.
Okay, I'll get out of this one. I'm going to hang up.
Joe, it's my last email to you.
All right. Seeing that we almost have Mr. Davidoff on video. There he is. We will move back in from executive session, and I will hand it over to Mr. Davidoff to make a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I make a motion to ratify the settlement of the tax appeal filed by 1050 Farmington Avenue LLC, the owner of properties located at 1050 Farmington Avenue, 1058 Farmington Avenue, 3 Grennan Road, and 4 Arlington Road as follows. The fair market value of each of the properties on the 2019 and 2020 grand list shall be $537,500 with an aggregate value of $2,150,000.
So move. Vote. Go for you. You have to, Miss Fay, you have to make him. I guess I have to go yay.
Yes, so make a motion to vote, or what do you ask me to do?
No,
I'm sorry.
The motion,
Wow.
the motion before it
Yeah.
is on the settlement, and I'm supporting it. Is that right?
Oh, yes, yes, I'm supporting it as well.
Without objection is so moved. Am I correct here, Ms. Verano? All right. And without that, I will move to adjourn. All right.
Right.
Thank you, Ms. Verano. Again, immaculate directions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You're welcome. Good evening.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. See you guys later. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Take care.